Hi, my name's Peter Coffin, and I, like a lot of other people, like games. Do you like games? People play games for a multitude of reasons. Entertainment, stress relief, the challenge. But why do people make games? Well, to make money, but I'm specifically talking about the New York Times. Why does the New York Times suddenly make games? Is this about adding a little fun and value to what is otherwise a fairly stiff, dry publication? Or is there something deeper going on? When we think about the New York Times, we think about news and New York and the time. We think of Pulitzers, not puzzles. Why are they making games? Is it just to make money, or is there some kind of secret plot here? It may surprise you to find that although there is plenty of column A, there is some of column B. It's actually a ton of column B. I really understated it there. Follow me here. So in order to get to the bottom of why the New York Times is secretly building a gaming empire, we have to start at the start. Not the very start, of course. The New York Times was founded in 1851, but rather when they first started putting crosswords in 1941. That's 90 years in. They were almost a century old in 1942, and we're like, we need to spruce this up. Listen up, the readers are getting antsy. After 90 big ones, the news ain't cutting the mustard like it used to. I think you're on the trolley, Chief. We do have to jazz it up. Let's maybe throw in a little razzle-dazzle in the form of a crossword puzzle. A crossword, eh? Now you're cooking with gas. That is just the bee's knees. It'll have them all doing the noodle dance, trying to figure it out. That's the ticket. We'll give them the old 1-2 punch. News for the noodle and puzzles for the panache. What is happening? So the New York Times added a crossword puzzle, and then 70 plus years later added some more games. Not exactly fast movers, the games department at New York Times. And then in 2020, everything stopped. Everyone became stuck in their house due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and everybody was looking for things to do. Now, as you might expect, during this era, New York Times games did super good. But there was another game along these lines that did really well in this era called Wordle. And so in 2022, they bought it. Wordle complemented their other games quite well. It got a lot more people visiting the crosswords section, which they rebranded to the games section because Wordle is obviously not a crossword game. And actually, a lot of the games aren't crossword games. They've got Sudoku, for God's sake, which, if my life depended on my ability to play Sudoku, I would immediately die. And I think that gives us an accurate picture of a shift in focus and resources towards games. It took them nearly 200 years to really care about games, and then the New York Times got game fever, baby. Let me in. There's another thing that happened over the last 10, 15 years that probably has some influence here, and it's that print media has taken the biggest nosedive you can possibly imagine. They've just rammed their teeth right in the sidewalk where it's killed the nerves and made them go gray. They're lucky to still have them, but why are they that color? I'm talking from experience. I did that when I was 4. I had a gray tooth until my adult teeth came in. Why did it turn gray? I still don't understand it. One might be compelled to think, oh, they're just throwing shit at the wall and trying to make some money. Games are a thing that they've thrown up against the wall, and it's worked. Why has it worked? Let's talk sales funnel. In a basic sales funnel, there's 4 stages: awareness, interest, desire, and action. The funnel essentially describes the process of weeding out various eventual non-customers, casting a wide net at the top, and making a sale at the bottom. According to an article in Vanity Fair called Inside the New York Times Big Bet on Games, games are critical to the Times' business strategy in trying to reach users, and ideally, future paying subscribers beyond its core news product. Of course, the Times is still competing for White House scoops with its traditional print and digital rivals and dispatching correspondents to war zones, but the company is also vying for people's attention against every app on their home screen. So it's developed products in recent years to satisfy the lifestyle needs of its audience: cooking, shopping, sports, and audio, building on the success of The Daily and a slew of podcasts. The products and journalism coexist under what the Times calls the bundle, an offering that has turbocharged the company's ambitious growth strategy. The bundle starts at $25 a month. A lot of people are actually buying the bundle through our games product, says Times Chief Product Officer Alex Hardiman. That's a pretty big shift in terms of where we were a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And that's what's so powerful about games as a funnel. People who engage with both news and games on any given week have the best long-term subscriber retention of any product combination in the bundle, and it isn't lost within the Times newsroom just how integral Wordle, connections, and the rest have become to the bottom line. As one Times staffer puts it, the half-joke that's repeated internally is that the New York Times is now a gaming company that also happens to offer news. Which brings us to an interesting point. What? Here's the front of the New York Times when I'm recording this. It is a blatantly ideological product. The Hamas leader who helped start the Gaza war is now key to its endgame. Yahya Sinwar is seen as an architect of the October 7th attacks. As mediators seek a ceasefire, a deal depends on Mr. Sinwar as well as his Israeli foes. This paints the conflict going on there as not something that started when imperialists plopped a new nation on top of an existing nation 80 years ago, but as one that started 8 months ago when this guy decided that they should attack Israel. In the Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky book Manufacturing Consent, the primary entity that they use for their case studies is the New York Times. You see, the New York Times isn't just a for-profit entity attempting to compete in a media ecosystem that is increasingly digital and very attention-oriented. They also have two things: an agenda and connections to the U.S. state. While we could get conspiratorial and talk about direct, straightforward connections, because those do exist, I think it's worth demonstrating that even if those didn't exist, they would still be acting as a manufacturing consent firm, i.e. capitalist state propaganda. You see, on page 2 of Manufacturing Consent, they talk about 5 filters of a propaganda model. I'm only going to talk about the one that's relevant here, which is the third, sourcing, the reliance of media on information provided by the government, business, and experts funded and approved by these primary sources and agents of power. If you unquestioningly rely on those entities for your information, you don't even have to have an agenda. You have their agenda. And anybody other than the most hardcore liberal subscriber of the New York Times can tell you that the New York Times clearly has agenda in its reporting. Which I think leads us to the biggest question of all: what does the focus on games accomplish beyond the obvious? So the New York Times is a news business that has launched a games division that is quickly becoming a thing that leads people into their ecosystem. This reminds me of a company that did the opposite: Nintendo. Back when I was a kid, Nintendo launched a magazine called Nintendo Power. It was essentially a periodical that acted as a news source for all things Nintendo. It's literally an advertisement for Nintendo. While before Nintendo's name was limited to the game racks in the electronics section, Nintendo now existed on magazine racks in the magazine section. So if you were walking through the magazine section and you saw Nintendo, you said, "Oh man, Nintendo, I like games. I kind of want to know what's going on in the game world. Let me pick this magazine up." And then the magazine would be like, "Oh, have we got a scoop for you, man. This is hot off the presses. We've got new games that you can buy coming out soon." Which, holy shit. Am I right? This is a very similar move in the opposite direction from the New York Times. You could consider the game racks in the electronics area the ideological area, and you could consider the periodicals, the magazine section, wherever you would see Nintendo Power pop up, as the apolitical area. It's an area where their agenda is not normally able to reach. You're walking around not thinking about video games, and suddenly you got a video game company right in your face. Makes that Star Wars lettuce that they launched back in 2016 feel different, doesn't it? Well, maybe not that different. But here, games is the apolitical space, the space that is devoid of the New York Times agenda. Here, they are using entertainment as a means to wedge themselves in. And make no mistake, I downloaded the app, and if you do not sign up for an account, they are blasting you with prompts to subscribe to the New York Times bundle every chance they get. Every time you start a game, they're telling you about it. And some games, like the main crossword, seem to be locked behind it. I was not interested enough in crosswords to figure out if I could get past this screen without signing up for anything and giving them money, but they are not playing around with that subscription prompt. And with that subscription, they funnel you into their main ecosystem. They suggest content to you from all over the place, whether it's cooking content, podcast content, or the Hamas leader who started the war 8 months ago, not 80 years ago. And they're giving you all of that because you're playing Spelling Bee, which... Lick men? No, lick men is incorrect. At least I tried. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that although, yes, they are attempting to cynically make money off of you by finding new ways to get into your pockets, they're also trying to get you into their ideological ecosystem to believe what they want you to believe. The New York Times is publicly traded, and that alone means that there are people with an embedded interest in imperialism that own large stakes in it. It also means the top institutional holders are, surprise, surprise, Vanguard and BlackRock. Finance capital has an embedded interest in basically everything, from energy production, oil, relevant here, to other cultural production in the United States. The New York Times is certainly not the only media company that they hold large stakes in. There are a million different ways that a conflict of interest could arise through this type of ownership arrangement, and it should be obvious that they do. Remember, articles aren't just written by somebody, they also go through a chain of people who make changes to it or decide that they're not going to run it at all. The journalists themselves could have every bit of intention to be investigative journalists that are holding power to account, but there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't happen. And now they're getting people into that through games. Now, just on the basis of this information alone, you might be saying to yourself, wow, the US economy is very rigged. And you're correct. It is. It's so rigged, they don't mind talking about how they're using games as a sales funnel to get them into their news ecosystem, their propaganda ecosystem. They're doing interviews with other media outlets who have similar ownership arrangements, bragging about the fact that this is working so well. So in the future, when you consume any kind of media, spend time thinking about the embedded interests because they're everywhere. Just because there's an agenda doesn't mean the information is useless. We just have to understand the agenda going in. So if you're playing those New York Times games, have fun, enjoy them, but understand they're trying to hook you with them. I think that's all I got for you. But what do you have for me? There's a whole comment section below for you to just fill right up. Buttons to slurp all over those. Lick them, please. And don't forget to money me at patreon.com/PeterCoffin. If you got plenty of time to kill, check out my latest documentary. If not, but you do want to watch more of my stuff, there is more of it right there. Thanks a lot for your time. Hope you have a good day.